Welcome back into the Sports Source, the second of our program, brought to you by Calhoun's. Tennessee will kick off at noon next week at Auburn, which means you can watch the game at any of the 9 area Calhoun's locations, or you can get a Feed 5 or Feed 10 family pack. Bring Calhoun's home to your party. No better place to go than Calhoun's. No better place to go and get food and bring it home than Calhoun's. The taste of Tennessee. Want to welcome in another VFL on our show. Always good to have Mike Stoll in town. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here and just sitting next to a great defensive lineman and not having to feel like I got to do pass pro or
no, you don't have to block him.
I won't hold him.
Watch it. Will go for your knees. He's a big cut blocker.
He is. Yeah, that's exactly right.
All right, gentlemen. When it comes to Tennessee's biggest weaknesses, just to speed this up, would it be safe to say the 3 biggest weaknesses: offensive line, young secondary, pass rush? Darrell Taylor played good against Georgia in terms of a pass rush this season. That's the blip rather than the regular. Would those be your 3, or do you throw anything else in there?
I would throw the tight ends in with the offensive line because they've not played well.
Okay. Even when they've tried to use Dominic Wood-Anderson out wide, they haven't had much success getting the ball to him.
No, they really haven't. Or he's dropped the ball. I mean, there's been several times he was open. He was the guy. They weren't easy catches, but you got to come up with some of those if you want the ball again.
I think speed is clearly an issue, but that's really hard to mask speed. So I'm not even going to leave that in our conversation. Well, let's start with the defense. Is there any way to mask the problem? I mean, here's the thing. How do you jerry-rig a pass rush that doesn't leave your young secondary exposed? And if you're trying to protect your young secondary, how do you bring blitzes to create a pass rush? Can that one be masked? How do you mask it?
No, it really can't. I mean, to mask a not very good secondary, you need to have a great pass rush of the front four. If you're going to have not a great front four, you need to have a back group that can cover all day long. So, I mean, right now you've got the worst of both worlds. I mean, you've got the weak secondary, and you got a front four that really can't get there, except for one game you had one guy that got there. So right now you're looking at it going, they can do anything they want. They've got plenty of time, and they got young guys to make bad decisions with. So it's a tough situation to be in because you can't mask both of those things. You got to have one that you trust, and right now they don't have any you trust.
Yeah, I think you're exactly dead on. I have been happy with the inside 3 guys on the defensive, on stopping the run. They've done better than they have in the past. And when they said they're going to 3-man front, I'm like, oh man, that's not going to go well because that is, you got to have a stud nose tackle. You got to have great defensive tackles, and we don't have the depth on that either. And you're like, oh gosh, through this gauntlet of teams that we're playing, how are they going to hold up? I think they've done well in the run defense, but the overall outside linebackers being able to do things, you're right. I mean, you leave your poor secondary alone, and unless you can get to them really quick, it's not going to go well for them.
And they don't have time to young secondary. A lot of guys run games. That's where our offensive line, I think, struggled. And they don't have time to do that because the guys are too open, get too fast. You need longer for the twist between tackles and defensive ends to actually work.
Right. Now, we'll say they've got talent back there in the secondary. I think I think they were wise to go ahead and just rip the Band-Aid, put the young guys out there. I think that will pay benefits down the road. But this year, I don't know that that's a problem you can mask. So that's, of the 3 major issues, that's 2 of them. And to mask one, you'd be exposing the other.
Yes,
so there's not a lot you can do there. Let's talk about the offensive line. There are a lot of people that say, well, it's play calling. Well, change the scheme. Your thoughts, how do you mask? And I don't think you can. You can for brief instances. You could for a drive, but you get 7 games to go. I don't think you can mask a bad offensive line for the next 7 games. But if you're trying to, what's your game plan for doing it, Mr. Former Offensive Lineman?
Well, so here's the thing is, how do you mask that? And if you look back over the last 7-8 years, Tennessee's offensive line has been bad. They've not been great.
Since Dooley's first year, really, they haven't had
And so why were they good in the early on Butch years? They had a dynamic quarterback in Josh Dobbs, who people didn't realize
he was the mask.
He was as good as he could be. He's on an NFL roster right now.
He didn't have a green face, but he was the mask.
He was the mask, right? So I think, and people took that for granted, like, oh, he's not that great of a quarterback. He's a darn good quarterback. And so what that did is it masked that ineptness by the offensive line. They're a lot worse in the offensive line than they were before. But now you don't have a quarterback that when he has shown the ability to run, he has not been confident in his tucking the ball and run. So I don't think they think that he is a dual threat quarterback. If you had a dual threat quarterback that could really run and kind of maybe keep people honest, you're all right, but they don't have that. That's the problem.
Well, okay. So you don't have that. What do you do? You're Jeremy Pruitt. Look, Brian Randolph. It took him one game. He watched the West Virginia game and he said Tennessee needs to go to the quick game, short passing, spread it out, which my stupid response at the time was, I don't know that I'd go there yet. Yeah, he called it after one guy. I do think that maybe that's something you want to try. Your passing game has been a little bit more successful than your run game at times. I think that if it is a quick game, very quick game, you might be able to keep Garantano upright long enough to attempt it. But do you go quick game as one example? Do you spread the field? Do you alternate tempo? What do you do to try and help a bad offensive line?
I'll let you try that one
first. You and I were talking in the first game, and so Tennessee wanted to come in and they wanted to run a power attack offense. They wanted to fire off at you and just run right at you and shove it down your throat. Tennessee can't do that, and I know I was commenting they can't do it, and you especially saw it in West Virginia when they started to have success. Is right off tackle, they move to a zone offensive line scheme because then it's more taking up spaces and areas versus one-on-one. If you go one-on-one and you get whipped, there's too much space. The guy comes through and makes a big hit. So the zone is one way to mask that. Is it going to be successful? Because now if I'm a defensive coordinator, any other game, any other team I play for, I'm going to put 8 guys in the box against Tennessee, and I'm going to say beat us with throwing the ball because they can't.
Yeah, and I think the biggest struggle they have, maybe they can go with the two running backs, motion one out, see if they can pull a guy outside the box. You got a pretty good stable there, but it's hard to do because as we saw in the Florida game, when they're on the goal line and they need to get out of the goal line, Florida and everybody in the game knew they're going left. They're going to follow Trey Smith. And so before that snap's even going, you see the linebacker fall forward and go in that direction because he knows this is the only play they've got to get us off the ball. Otherwise, they can't do it.
Well, that was a downer. Okay. Tell you what, I want to continue this conversation. We'll talk about possibility of using Ty Chandler in more varied ways. Next, we'll rotate the panel a little bit. Come on back on the Sports Source.